Having worked as a nurse on an oncology floor, I see how cancer affects not only the patient, but the whole family. Ward, as a cancer patient for over 3 years, what do you have to say to family caregivers on this subject?
Really, it's to both sides of the equation. It's not just the caregiver, but the patient, because that relationship is so profound and it's so fundamental to the treatment process. And the first thing to understand and realize about cancer is it is so catastrophic. It is so huge. The enormity of that diagnosis affects everyone. It's like a stone in a pond. The ripples go out, and everyone in the family is affected. Children, not just adults and spouses, but the children, employees, and co-workers. I mean, it's amazing how many people one diagnosis affects and goes and continues to affect. So it's very important. I say that cancer is a social disease. It's not just a metabolic or a molecular or a genetic type of a disease, but it is a social disease that affects social systems, and nothing more intimate than the family. And the critical thing is to understand, for the caregiver to understand, that the patient is on a personal journey. I call it a hero's journey, because to stand up in the face of that diagnosis and to continue with life, to try to find a reason to live and new ways to live in that is a true heroic process. And however that plays out, these people are all heroes. But it's a solitary journey. So when I was diagnosed, I have cancer. I have great compassion for the people around me. But ultimately, I'm walking this path in my shoes. No one can step in those shoes. It's amazing, this paradox, this feeling of isolation, aloneness, and yet this intimacy that you have with your caregiver. It's difficult to put into words. But the thing that happens is stuff happens in your head. So it's not just the physical disease. It's fear of the unknown. It's grappling with issues of who am I and what did I accomplish in my life and why is this happening to me? These are deeply, profoundly disturbing questions. They can have wonderful, positive outcomes as you process them. But while it's happening, it stirs the pot. It's a very difficult process. So for a caregiver, it's important to understand that you have to give some room to the patient. Don't try to overmanage them. They're not going to respond the way you think they should. You have to be there, you have to provide support, but you have to honor their individual experience because it's unique to them and it's not the same as yours. A friend of mine shared with me, her husband was experiencing had a diagnosis of terminal cancer, and before he passed away, she was having trouble processing it. And there came a point where she realized that she was projecting her own values onto her husband. It's like, well, if she were in that situation, she would hope that she would act this way and such. And finally, she stepped back and realized he was having his own experience, and that was right for him. Might not be for her. That's a huge shift, and is one that I encourage everyone to look at themselves. How are you managing it? But let's flip the coin. The patient needs to have the same sensitivity to the caregiver and understand that just because it feels like everything is crushing down on you, and believe me, that's what it feels like. It's the most narcissistic experience in the world. It's like it's all about me. And suddenly you come to this realization that your illness has profoundly changed the quality of life of your caregivers, of the people who love you, the people in your family, the people around you. And to have compassion for that and step back and say, you know, I don't know how I would act if I were in their shoes. And so to try to avoid judgment, to try to avoid expectations, and to try to avoid projecting onto the other what you think they should be doing, and instead look for it as an opportunity to improve communication. Ask for what you need, not only medically, but emotionally and spiritually. And hopefully we'll talk more about those in some other presentations. But that's it. It's seeing the individuality of the experience for both the caregiver and the patient.